going live stream. Today, on the last stream anyways, we got all the way through Act 9. We actually got about 99% of the way through Act 10, and all we have left at this point is to finish off Kitava, and we'll probably do some map runs after that. So just before we go in and fight Kitava, we did obviously run into issues during the first fight that we had with him in Act 10, just because I simply had very, very outdated gear on at the time. So I'll go ahead and kind of show you what I did to gear up in, then and now. That way you can kind of get an idea of, like the video that I had made about crafting gear once you hit that wall. This will give you kind of an idea of essentially how I fixed that. So we got a new chest piece. This has a 4-link just like the other one did, except we actually have a benefit to the number of zombies and skeletons we have. We didn't have that before. We focus primarily on maximum energy shield. Intelligence also adds to our energy shield. Life regen helps us as well. The other stat that I've added to a lot of these, aside from actually going ahead and getting almost all of our resistances to that max 75 for the fight, is adding on a bunch of extra health. Now, the biggest reason for this is the fact that your damage stats, aside from minion damage, don't actually matter when you're a necromancer or if you're playing any other type of minion build. So you primarily want to build up on your defenses for your actual gear itself. So with that said, there is one thing we're going to do here before we go in and fight Kitava again. I'm going to summon my specters. Now, the specters that we summon, unfortunately, it's an enemy that only shows up here early on in Act 2. But there's a trick to us actually getting a higher level one. So we'll just have to wait until we actually run into one. And it's a Carnage Chieftain, by the way, is what we're looking to summon. The reason why we're summoning a Carnage Chieftain is because of the fact that it actually offers us frenzy charges. So there's one right there. So now that we've defeated him, let's get rid of this guy first. We can go ahead, summon Spectre. And now we have a Carnage Chieftain. Now the only problem is, this is a very low level Carnage Chieftain. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and summon some zombies, just so we've got some backup. And 11 is our max at the moment. So what we're going to do from here is we're going to head... I suppose we could have just went through and walked a little ways to get to the forest encampment, but this will be a few seconds quicker. We're going to go to the actual area that we're supposed to be in, and we're going to use Desecrate, which will put corpses on the ground, because if you have something summoned, it'll actually have a chance of including that in your Desecrate. So we're going to want to head all the way over here, so we're just going to start from the square. Now when you use Desecrate, it's going to create corpses that are either the level of your Desecrate, or if the level of your Desecrate is higher than the area that you're in, it'll create corpses based on the level of the area that you're in. Now, our Desecrate, unfortunately, isn't that high a level, so I believe it's going to summon a level 41 corpse for us, but that's still better than what we were going to get, summoning one in Act 2. So, my only Desecrate that I have with my actual build itself is used as a passive, because it's assigned to a cast when damage taken, so we can't actually cast it manually. But that's why I keep this ring on me, with just a Desecrate gem in it. So you'll notice now it shows 2 Desecrates. The one with the exclamation point next to it, that means I can't cast it. And the reason I can't cast that is because it's attached to that cast when damage taken. So we will assign the other one. And you can see right there, there's a Carnage Chieftain in there. So this, unfortunately, can be a bit of a task, trying to actually select the right one. As you can see, my blue circle's all the way over here, and my Carnage Chieftain's on the exact opposite side. So hopefully that's something they address at some point. So we've summoned one, but we're going to want to summon another one, just because we're not going to want that one from Act 2 with us also. And so there we go. So now we can go ahead and assign our original ring back and put our charged dash back to where it was. And we can head off to defeat Kitava. Now this should go much smoother than it did last time. Our minions should do a decent amount of damage output to Kitava. It's really just going to be a matter of us dodging a lot of those more powerful attacks and just making sure that we've built up enough health and energy shield to the point where we're not getting one shot. At this point, I believe our overall effective health plus energy shield is around 4,500. I'd like for it to be around 5,000, but having it only be, 500 off of that, while having all these minions that are, kind of going to distract some of the add-ons that we'll run into, it should be plenty. So it shouldn't be too far up here. And we're just about the right level for this fight also. So that should make this a little bit easier. Now, if you do this on just a full playthrough, you'll likely be a little higher level, just because of the fact that we zipped through a lot of side quests, which means we also left some passive skill points behind too. So ideally, you should actually be a little bit better set up for this fight than what I am. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for watching. So I'm actually excited for this fight against Kitava, because this is kind of the culmination of everything we've been doing here in these streams. The main purpose, and I've talked about it a few times, was essentially to show you that you can go from Act 1 to Act 10, finish the game, not use the trade market at all. So no buying items from anyone, no selling items to anyone, and literally just using what you find in-game or crafting from what you find in-game. A lot of people on PC do it. They'll play the solo self-found queue, which doesn't even allow you, to trade or play with people. I should go back and grab this map here. Fortunately, I think our specters may have died on the way here. We're not going to resummon them, though. I don't want to go back and do that. Nice thing is our zombies at this point should have some relatively high survivability as well. And a lot of Kitava's attack, well, almost all of his attacks actually, they actually do less damage to your minions than they do to you. So I don't suspect that we'll have to resummon them during the fight. They should be fine. I've also gone ahead and equipped Shield Bash onto this build, just so we can kind of get in and out of situations a bit quicker. Kitava has a lot of attacks that telegraph themselves in a pretty obvious way. You just have to be able to actually dodge them in time. Shield Charge, we'll be able to cast that plenty quick enough to actually get through it. But, when we are using our other movement skill, it just wasn't quite fast enough. That charge, time in order to actually move from point A to point B, we were kind of dying when we were using that attack. A lot of that had to do with how squishy we were, but at the same time, you also need to be able to move fast enough to actually avoid his attacks in general. And Shield Bash is just a lot better for that. We're going to run a few maps tonight. After this, I'm probably going to jump on my flashback character to do that, though. Excuse me. But honestly, around tier 6 and 7, in my opinion anyways, is when you do start to hit a bit of a progression wall in mapping, just because you're going from, you know, your regular maps to yellow maps at that point. So the bosses get a little stronger. A lot of it really has to do with... It's kind of having to do with your build. And one thing you'll notice too is level 75 gear should be dropping for you at this point. So it's actually an opportunity for you to grab a little better gear. Especially if you're, you know, still using a couple pieces that maybe, you know, in that level like 68 range or so, like the stuff you'd be picking up in story still. And if you have some open suffixes or prefixes on your character's gear, I would definitely at that point go ahead and just mastercraft some statistics on there. Anytime that you have, you know, an open stat on your character, you know, that's more potential DPS, it's more potential HP that's, you know, just kind of being left behind that could really be beneficial to your character. So I would check out your gear before anything. I mean, if you've gotten to tier 6 or 7 maps, it's probably safe to assume that your passive tree is absolutely fine. We just lagged, we rubber banded there pretty hard. But yeah, for the most part, like, if you've progressed well through the game and you're kind of hitting a wall, I'd say 90% of the time it's your gear. So we should be relatively close here. Oh, we just made a big circle, actually. I really like Shield Bash just because of how much distance you can cover in such a short amount of time. The other movement skill I really like is Flame Dash, but Flame Dash has a limited, you know, amount of charges on it. It's just 3 charges. So you can't spam it quite as often as Shield Charge. Here we go. So here we go. Kitava Part 2. This is admittedly probably the only boss fight in the main game that I actually struggle with on occasion. So let's go in and see how we do.
I shall strike you down.
I'm actually in the same boat. I play Templar almost well, before I started streaming, I played Templar almost exclusively. See, as you can see, our minions are actually doing quite a bit of decent work for us here. Attacking the heart, that skeleton army's doing great. So, when you're looking for better gear, I think the biggest thing is to just try not to really overthink it. There's a lot of, you know, different affixes in the game, a lot of different stats, and it can be really overwhelming. I just died. Rip. If you overthink it, it just gets a bit more confusing. So yeah, this fight positioning is like 90% of this battle. If you get into a bad spot, you kind of screw yourself here. Like I almost did right there. Yeah, good gear is it's strictly based on, you know, what fits your build and what doesn't. I would always prioritize tankiness over DPS. That's just me personally. Like in this battle here, we'd be doing a little better if we had some extra health. DPS will only do you, you know, so much good in this game. A dead Exile does no damage. So, I mean, health is always a priority. You can also go with energy shield, armor, or evasion. You can do somewhat of a combination of 2 of them. I wouldn't recommend trying to do all 3, though. If you try and do all 3, it's just going to convolute your build. you don't really want to try and be a jack of all trades when it comes to the defensive stats, just because of the fact that, you know, if you have 3 mediocre stats, it's not really going to help you out. Hey man, how's it going tonight? The other thing you want to focus on defensively is getting all your resistances up to as close to 75% as you can. It made it at the beginning too. Oh, I'm beyond ready for Legion. Like, I didn't mind Synthesis League, but I think Legion's gonna be next level. We're gonna die. Yeah, we got cornered there. I mean, the thing is with Legion coming out, if you're playing the actual Legion League, you're going to have to completely re-gear anyways, because each league you create a new character. Just like Diablo seasons. Our minions are just not going in there and attacking. There we go. That fire sucks so bad. Yeah, I keep putting myself in a bad spot. I think if I wouldn't have stuck to the corners here, this would have gone a lot smoother. We still made it through, but we looked pretty bad in the process. So at this point, we'll destroy the heart, and that's going to be it for Act 10. We ripped more times in this final boss fight than I think we did the rest of the game combined. So for your gear that you've been grinding out, have you been kind of just picking up gear that you find in game, or have you actually been like crafting some bases? Getting your elemental resistances up, that's... I mean, I think balancing that, having the right color sockets, and getting good affixes, I mean, it's not even that I think that. I mean, that is literally the entire battle of actually trying to gear your character correctly. And it's really difficult to not sacrifice one for the others. And that's, I mean, the main goal that you're trying to get to when you are gearing up is just making sure that you actually have all three of those things.
By the light of... I suspect you're about ready for a flight.
So I played that final boss fight terribly, but we actually made it through. Eventually.
Before Kitava.
One thing to keep in mind too, if you're not really getting the stats that you're looking for on specific pieces of gear, but you have a good base for it, you can always use an Orb of Scouring to take all those stats off and just recraft onto the same item. A lot of people do that with alchemy orbs. They call it yellow alching. Not always the most efficient way to do it, but it's the cheapest way to do it. The other good way to do it from, you know, a white base item is actually using essences, so that way you're actually guaranteed at least one of the stats that you're trying to get. Otherwise, you can also play a little bit of Delve and get some resonators and some fossils. I can kind of show you what those look like here in my stash. I don't have many of them, but these work the same way that like an alchemy orb would on a white item. So this one here, I can actually socket in 2 different fossils, and these yellow things down here are fossils. And I mean, they do exactly what they say. So if I put this one in here, I'm going to have a higher chance for modifiers to mana, but I'm not going to get anything in regards to speed. So no attack speed, no minion speed, no movement speed, nothing like that. If I'm looking for fire modifiers like fire resist, fire damage added to attacks, I would use this, and it's not going to give me any cold. So as you can see, you can kind of combine these inside of a resonator. Like the one socket ones obviously can only hold one, but you can get 2 and up to 3 socket resonators. And that can make crafting quite a bit easier too, just because you're going to be taking a few things, out of the equation for when you're crafting your items. So yeah, we went ahead and we ripped a few times at the final boss. I kind of knew we would. It was actually more my play fault than it actually was our build. I was kind of trying to read chat and communicate talk at the same time, so I was just kind of sitting in the corner for some of those attacks. When he does that fire attack, you actually want to go to the opposite corner instead of sitting in the top corner. I kept sitting in the top corner, and it was getting that's literally how we died pretty much every time that we died in that boss fight. So learn from what I did and don't do that. But yeah, we did an entire playthrough, and as you can see, the gear that we have, we did it without a single unique. I really would have liked to have a Baron helmet for this build, just because it makes the Necromancer so much more powerful. But, this kind of just, proves my point and shows that it's more difficult, it's going to take you more time, but you can absolutely get through the game and get to endgame content without having to purchase anything in the marketplace. And once you get to mapping, you can start to build up currency at that point, and then you can go ahead and spend more on your actual gear. With a Necromancer, it is admittedly a bit easier to gear just because of the fact that your attack stats don't really matter. Most of your attack stats come from your actual passive skill tree. So we're going to do a little bit of mapping, but what I'm going to do, just because I haven't gotten to play Flashback nearly as much as I'd like to, so we're actually going to go to my Flashback character here. Plus, I think Flashback is a bit more entertaining just because of all the random modifiers that are added in. Yeah, the marketplace is brutal. So, like, there's one item in particular that would really help this character out. And from what I've seen on the trade marketplace, like, I've only actually even seen one pop up. And today there's actually not any. So this character's actually been kind of the same ordeal. I haven't really bought anything off the marketplace. This was an extremely lucky drop for me. Tabula Rasa is... it will help you fast track your build in a hurry, just because it is that 6-link white socket item. It doesn't have any stats on it, but it allows you to maximize the potential of your main attack, because you can have an attack with 5 support gems, and you can literally assign them anywhere, because white sockets will let you put in any color gem into it. So that works out pretty great. So I did have some people asking about when you begin mapping. So let's say we just finished Act 10 with this character. As you saw with the Necromancer, this is where it would take us. So initially you're just going to travel north, and this will take you to the Templar Laboratory. The Templar Laboratory, there's going to be a map device. There'll also be an NPC who kind of guides us through mapping. You can buy some maps through her as well. At this point in the game, you should have actually looted a few maps throughout. I think it's like chapter 7 or 8 that they start dropping. But yeah, you can talk to Zana. You can purchase maps from her and cartographer's chisels. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it though, just because of the fact that you're gonna run into enough maps as it is. You can go to the Atlas table, which actually show you your Atlas. Otherwise, you can also hit the big center button and access your Atlas from there too, as long as you're in the same area as your actual map device. So maps are for this actual map device here, and that's exactly how you're going to run maps. So when you first come in here, your atlas is going to be completely empty. All these little areas here that have like the little bronze circle around them, that just means that they're maps that I've completed. So ones that are actually grayed out like this, it just means I haven't actually run that map yet. So your goal essentially in the atlas is to try and keep moving forward into these centerpieces, and there's a couple of bosses that you run into while you're mapping in the atlas, namely the Shaper and the Elder, and you're essentially trying to work your way through and collect items and, you know, defeat the Elder and the Shaper. They do interesting things in areas that they reside in. So like all of these little starred areas right now, or these little, you know, universe looking areas, these are actually being influenced by the Shaper right now. And then this little strange gray area, that's being influenced by the Elder. So they'll actually show up in these areas. So when you first start, you're only going to get tier 1 maps. Yeah, absolutely, no problem. I mean, that's my goal in the first place, so. Now, the thing that kind of sucks about this area, you don't have a stash here. Do I have specific drop? The Elder and the Shaper do have some items that they will specifically drop, and you can also get special rare items that'll drop in influenced maps that are Shaper and Elder items, and I'll actually show those to you when we go to the hideout here. So one thing you can do in this area to make your mapping a lot easier is if you talk to Zana and just it might not be an option here just because she's already back at my base, but you can invite her to your hideout. I would recommend doing that. You should be able to do it just through those dialogue options. So that way when you go back to your hideout, she will be there and you can actually place a map device in your hideout. So I've got one right here. That's going to make life a million times easier because now I can actually go into my stash, check out my maps, see my atlas, and actually run maps in the map device all at the same time. You can't do that in the Templar Laboratory because you don't have a stash in there. So in the beginning, you're just going to have tier 1 maps. There's 4 different maps. They'll drop in a pretty regular basis once you hit like Act 8 or so. Let's see. So we don't really have anything that's Elder or Shaper influenced here in tier 1 maps, and usually you won't. Yeah, man, absolutely. So we'll just run a tier 1 map just because that's typically what you do at the start of the game anyways. So we'll grab one of those. And another thing that we're going to do here is we're going to upgrade the map. Maps work a lot like items. You can actually upgrade them to different rarities, which is going to be helpful because that number that's in the center of the map there, or the center of the atlas where it says 22 of 159, that's actually going to increase the likelihood that I have maps drop while I'm running maps. You do want to run the maps that are, Elder and Shaper influenced, just because the rewards are going to be higher. And I said I was going to show you. So the ones with the stars in the background of them. So these are actually, Elder items. And these ones with the tentacles, those are Shaper, or it's the opposite. The ones with the galaxy are Shaper, and the ones with the tentacle are Elder. Now, if you identify them, the special thing about these items is they'll have a modifier that these items normally can't get. It'll be randomly chosen. It's not determined, but these items can be relatively valuable because of the modifiers that they can roll. And they're also valuable because, much like the Chaos Orb recipe that I showed you guys, where if you collect a full set of items, if you do that with Elder or Shaper items, you will get Exalted Shards, which can help you progress towards getting an Exalted Orb, which is typically the most valuable currency item in the game. One of the most valuable currency items in the game. So that's just something to keep in mind, and that's a reason to keep these unidentified too if they're not ones you're going to use. Like, I'm not going to use a bow. I'm also not going to use a two-handed staff for this character. So those are things I'm going to keep unidentified. These are just all items that I preferred not to use, so I'm leaving them unidentified because it'll actually double the amount of shards that I get when I do turn those in. So in order to actually increase this number here in the Atlas to increase the likelihood that we get maps dropping when we're running maps in the Atlas, we need to run them at a specific rarity. And you can tell what you need to run them at because this little bonus area. So like here in the Cursed Crypt map, it says bonus, kill boss of magic or higher version of this map. So magic is blue. So if we run a blue version of this map, kill the boss, we will get a bonus point, and that will be added to that number there in the middle. Now, as you can see from this, I already have the check mark, so I've already gotten this one. But that's just something to keep in mind. If you don't have that check mark there, I would upgrade the rarity of your map accordingly. So for the first 5 tiers, it's always going to be magic. So it'll always be a blue map. And when you get up to level 6, you're going to have to upgrade it to a rare version of the map. So it'll have to be yellow, so you'll be using alchemy orbs on it, essentially. Now when you do that and you increase, so here we have, you know, an alleyways map. It's superior. That's just, there was randomly some better quality on the map when I looted it. But let's go ahead and turn it into a magic item. So we'll use an orb of transmutation. And now you'll see it actually has more modifiers on it. So 20% monster physical damage reduction, monsters have 30% increased accuracy rating, and our chance to dodge is unlucky. So it's going to make the map more difficult. And in return, you'll see the item quantity and item rarity also went up with, you know, that difficulty. So we're going to get better drops from it also. So it's kind of a risk versus reward type of thing. Hey, Galfetti, how's it going? See, it does look kind of cool, like the background anyways. But, I mean, you could identify this bow, and just like any other, you know, rare yellow item, it could unfortunately be complete trash. But once we have our map ready to go, we'll just hit square, throw it in the device, and then hit R1 to activate. Now, when you run it in your hideout, it's actually going to give you these options for different modifiers you can throw on there. I don't want to spend any Chaos Orbs running maps, so we're just going to stick with the top one, which is going to give us a 4% increased quantity of items. So there's just going to be a few more items within the map itself. And that's going to drop our 6 portals. So anytime that you exit out of the map or die, it's actually going to take away one of those portals. So you only get 6 to start off with, so you want to be careful to, you know, not exit to sell items too often or to not die within the map, because if you run out of portals, then I wouldn't say you necessarily fail the map, but you're not going to be able to complete it. And from here, it's essentially just like running any other area of the game. Another reason why you don't want to die while mapping is after you finish Act 10, you're going to suffer a 10% experience penalty. So you're going to lose, you know, 10% of your current experience towards your next level. That's one of the biggest reasons why people struggle to hit higher levels, because as the difficulty increases, you're more likely to die and actually lose the XP that you need. And you need such a large amount of XP to start leveling later on in the game that you can kind of hit a wall to where it just gets really frustrating to level up. You know, that's why last I checked, there weren't any PS4 players who had actually hit level 100 yet. That may have changed. I know there were some people in like the mid-90s, but hitting level 100 is definitely not easy. You know, especially when the game does have kind of some of the stuttering, rubber banding, lagging issues, blue screen issues. It just makes it that much harder. So hopefully that's something that GGG will recognize. I'm really hoping we, they put a lot of hard work into Legion. That's clear from actually checking out the trailer, seeing all the stuff they've added. I'm really excited for it. But at the same time, I do hope they do some optimization for PS4, because we could definitely use some. So a tier 1 map for this character is going to be relatively easy. I think I've run up to tier, I think 7 with this character so far. Haven't struggled too much, but it's not super uncommon for my character to die at tier 7. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that some of the gear that I need is just not obtainable right now. So I'm actually kind of glad we ran into this here. So any of you who are interested in running Delve, who don't know where to find more sulfate, so you can actually delve further, this is a sulfate vein. Nika will show up when you hit those, and that's essentially the only way to get more sulfate, so you can keep going in the delve. So that's something to keep in mind. If you do run into an area on the Atlas that has a dark gray circle around it, Nico's actually guaranteed to show up in those maps. Whenever he shows up in a map, you'll be able to hit 3 of those sulfate mines. So you'll be able to kind of stack a little bit in there. Now the other thing is, you can notice when we have the overhead map up, it actually shows us all the different modifiers that are in here. I may turn that off at some point just because it does block my vision quite a bit, and I do like running the overhead map. Don't have my stone golem summoned. God, I wish I could squeeze through that little area there. But in maps, if you look up above all that blue text, you'll see like some bronze, gold-ish text. It'll actually tell us how many monsters are left in the map. And each map will also have a boss. So there we hit all 3 sulfite mines. It's going to tell us that that mission's complete. However, we haven't finished the actual, mission for the map. Now, we won't get a notification for finishing this map just because I've done this one before and I've done the challenge for it. But if we are doing this fresh, since we upgraded to blue, once we go ahead and defeat the boss of the map, it would tell us that we've completed that mission. So we still have 50 monsters remaining on the map, so still a decent amount. So I've learned with the 3rd boss fight in the labyrinth, at least for me anyways, and you may be running into different issues, but my issue seems to always be with the room layout and how many traps are actually in that room, and being essentially teleported on top of traps. I've found that I typically will do better in that last fight of the labyrinth. This is going to sound probably not all that helpful, but honestly, like when I tell it to myself in my head, it helps out a lot. Keep your calm. Don't overuse your movement skills. Kind of wait for him to come towards you and then use a movement skill to dodge out of the way, because that big smash attack that he does, that's where a majority of his damage comes from. So if you can avoid that giant smash attack and kind of dodge out of the way once he shoots those green projectiles, that's going to win you the battle. Like, that's 3/4 of the battle right there. Those are his 2 big attacks. If you can avoid those and avoid the traps in the room, just take your time, be patient. You should do absolutely fine. So we're going to clear out this area and do this breach that's right here. These shields annoy me. When an enemy has like that little gold shield over him, you literally have to just stand right inside of that shield to do decent damage to him. So activate this breach. Now, this can actually be a little risky to do when you're trying to level up at endgame, just because enemies in these little, different modified areas that are exclusive to flashback, they're just more deadly. than regular enemies are. As you can see, we got a gold enemy right there. But he did drop us a ton of splinters just now. So again, there's just a lot of risk and reward. No, I started off the stream on my Necromancer class. And I had finally beaten the last boss after getting my butt handed to me a few times. Just because admittedly I'm not very good with the Kitava fight. I don't dodge the fire attack in the correct way. And I was getting a little distracted by myself. But once I finished, I actually moved on to my Shadow character. And this is a Trickster, to be more specific. The nice thing about the Trickster class... Thank you. The nice thing about the Trickster class is there is a node in your Ascendancy that you can pick up that makes it so your travel skills don't cost any mana. So it's nice to build like a Winter Orb build around. This is a Winter Orb build because I can just charge this Winter Orb and then just spam my shield charge and essentially let my Winter Orb whittle everything down. The actual Ascendancy is Trickster, but I mean, I guess it is. He does look kind of like a thief character, but they call him a Shadow in the game.
What happened?
Yeah, if I were to say like what he had closely resembled from like other games, I'd say it's like a thief type of character. You can tell like he's kind of intended to dual wield weapons and be sneaky. Oh, we kind of backed ourselves into a corner here. I screwed that one up. Admittedly, I just don't do a lot of the synthesis stuff anymore. It's a really fun class. Once this new update comes out for Legion, I think it's going to make it so legitimately all the classes are fun to play. Like right now, my least favorite is probably Marauder, but a lot of that has to do with how bad of a position melee characters are in at the moment. So I think with the upgrade to the melee system, it's going to help out a lot. So this build in particular that I'm using, and we've pretty much finished this map. There's only 6 monsters remaining. We did randomly kill the boss in the area, so the boss sometimes will actually show up right within like the main map. A lot of times though, there'll be a little doorway into an area called the arena, and you'll defeat the boss in the arena. It's essentially just a gold boss. Now when you do start mapping, just keep in mind there's not actually an exit portal unless you go back to the portal in the beginning. So keep a few portal scrolls on you so you can just portal right on out. Yeah, as I was saying about the Trickster and the way that this one's built, this is built around a theory craft that I don't know their username. I just know that they were based out of China. On one of the subreddits, they had kind of toyed around with the idea. A guy named Gazzy actually made a build off of it. And then I had kind of done a little bit of research on multiple builds and kind of threw together a few things of my own. But the idea is you go ahead and you charge up. Let's see, which one do I have it equipped on? Okay, I have it on my boots. It's based off of the skill Winter Orb, which is a channeling skill. That's that little bluish white circle you were seeing over my head, and that circle fires projectiles. Now the thing is, you're stationary, so like I'm hitting the left stick, I'm just spinning around right now. It doesn't actually let you move, so you want to pair that with a movement skill. I've been using shield charge. It's kind of a matter of preference. The reason why I'm using shield charge is because originally I was using Flame Dash. Flame Dash only has 3 charges on it, so you're limited in how often you can spam it. But since I took that Ascendancy node to where I don't have to spend any mana on movement skills, it just makes sense to use Shield Dash because I can, or Shield Charge, because I can do this as much as I want to, and it spends no mana. Now you'll notice I have a lot of mana in reserve, and that's because a lot of the other skill gems that you're going to use with this build are auras. And they're going to use a bunch of mana reserve. So like the one I have on this ring is Herald of Purity. Now that essentially is, yeah, it does exactly what it says here. But it takes up, 25% of my mana. And that's what's summoning these sentinels and everything. Now, the thing is, I have that stashed in this particular ring, and it's kind of what makes this whole build work, because this ring has the ability to give elemental equilibrium to that one socket. So basically, it's, as far as I know, the only way to actually give minions elemental equilibrium. Now, the socket I have in here, Herald of Purity, it doesn't actually give an elemental attack. It's just base physical damage to 4 Sentinels of Purity that spawn when we kill enemies or hit rare and unique enemies. The way that we get around that, however, is by attaching... Let's see, where is it? Okay, so it's right here. Mirrored items is just literally a mirrored copy of another item. It doesn't do anything special or anything like that. It's just sometimes you'll run into caches in the game that'll drop 2 completely identical items, and it's because one is mirrored off the other. So it's just the same thing. I think like the picture of the item actually flips. But it doesn't actually do anything different as far as I know anyways, unless they've changed something about that. So this Hatred gem, it casts an aura that grants extra cold damage based on physical damage to us and our allies. So that actually grants those 4 minions cold damage, and it grants us cold damage as well. And the way that we make that work with elemental equilibrium is this node right here, Avatar of Fire, where we take all of our different damage types and we turn it all into fire. We also use Ice Spear with different support gems, but essentially the idea of this build is the fact that our minions are doing cold damage, which is proccing elemental equilibrium, which makes fire and lightning do more damage, and we're doing straight fire damage because we're essentially turning all of our different damage types into just fire damage. That's the basis of it. The other items I could have to help this item or this build out, there's a helmet that increases the amount of levels that you have for ice and fire gems, and also grants you ice to fire at level 30, which we have ice to fire on our Ice Spear already, but it makes it so you can also put it on your Winter Orb, so it makes that more powerful. But yeah, I've kind of gone into the build long enough. We'll go into Einhar, and we're going to sell our 6 sockets, because that's going to give us a bunch of Jeweler's Orbs. And we'll probably go ahead and actually run... see where the Shaper's at. We'll run one of the Shaper maps. So there's actually already a tier 2 map, which is dungeon, and I'm assuming we don't have any dungeon. What do we have? He's also in the port, which is 4. Arcade, which is 4. Okay, good. We do have an arcade map. So a corrupted item is just an item that you can't actually do any master crafting or any alteration of. You can corrupt an item with a Vol Orb, one of these, and it can actually make your item a lot better by giving it some really nice stat boosts, or it can completely ruin your item up to the point of actually, destroying your item altogether. So there's another risk reward of actually corrupting items on your own. So we'll go ahead and turn this into a magic map, even though we already have the bonus for it. But we'll just kind of run this map. I'll show you exactly what the shaper actually does, and we should run into a shaper item also. Now, when you're running maps, there's a small percentage chance of any map that's of a lower tier or the same tier as the map that you're running that you've already completed in your atlas dropping. And there's a much higher probability of a map that is adjacent to that map in the atlas, so a map that's directly next to it and attached with one of those little roads. You have a higher probability of those maps dropping. I don't know if it's a straight 1 in 4 chance. I don't know the actual probability behind it, like the actual odds. I admittedly don't do a lot of corrupting. Although I probably should start investing a little bit of time into it just because of the fact that I do craft a decent amount of my gear. So as you can see, like, Winter Orb is actually a relatively, powerful attack. And you'll also see that it's giving us charges. Those little blue and green circles that are floating all around our character, those are charges, and those give us additional benefits as well. And that's another nice thing about the Trickster, is he generates those based off of channeling attacks, which Winter Orb is technically a channeling attack. Now the only downside is we do have to make sure that periodically we hold down that attack button so that we're continuing to charge our Winter Orb so that it doesn't cool down completely, so it'll continue to attack. Now, another skill I have equipped here is Mark of the Warlord. That's what that red circle is that I'm proccing there. The reason why I run that is because of the fact that I'm running so many auras that are keeping some of my mana in reserve. I don't have a lot of mana to work with. And Ice Spear takes not a ton of mana, but if I want to hit it more than a couple times, I need some extra mana for it. Now, Mark of the Warlord actually gives me some extra mana regen based on how many times I hit something. So if I'm, charging my Winter Orb and it's hitting enemies around me and they've been hit by Mark of the Warlord, it's going to essentially keep the little bit of mana that I do have at full charge. So that way I'm ready to use Ice Spear when I need it. Or I can also just go ahead and basically spam Ice Spear the entire time and just keep attacking with my high attack, or my high damage attack. As you can see there, like, normally I'd only be able to hit that probably twice, 3 times tops. So here we actually just defeated the boss. Now this squid looking guy, that's the Shaper. And he essentially brings the boss back to life. So we have to fight the boss again. And we just completed a shaper map. Now these probably won't be quite that easy when you first start off, just because you're going to be building up your gear. But like, say something like this. So this is an energy shield based item. I have an energy shield based character. So if I was looking to upgrade my chest piece, I'm not, just because I have that tabula rasa, which the only way I'm going to be able to swap that out is if I find a 6-link item. But say I was, it's not a bad idea to just pick this thing up, identify it. You're going to get so many scrolls of wisdom, it doesn't matter. Now +2 intelligence, that's good. Some plus to energy shield, some plus to life, and life regen. This is actually a pretty decent item. So if I was in desperate need of a chest piece, this could potentially be an upgrade. It has 2 prefixes, 2 suffixes. So I could go ahead and, since one of the prefixes is maximum energy shield and max life, I could go ahead and actually add more of just max life on there. Or the suffix that's free, I could add some elemental resistance to that. That's kind of what I look for when I'm looking for, rare items in order to upgrade my current gear and to finish my build up. I'm looking for items where I can get a majority of the stats that I'm looking for on the item already. And if it's missing, say one stat that I'm really looking for, as long as I can mastercraft it on there, it's still a useful piece of gear. So you can use chromatic orbs as early as you want to, simply because of the fact that, like, you're going to find a lot of what I call chromatic items. And a chromatic item, let's see, I know I actually don't have any anymore. So a chromatic item is, say these gloves, I had a green socket, a red socket, and say one of those red sockets was blue. So it's got a green, red, a blue socket, and connections. You're going to pick up a lot of those in the game, and you can trade them directly to a vendor for another chromatic orb. Chromatic orbs are, and items are going to drop like candy later on in the game, so don't be shy to use those. If it's for a piece of gear that's going to be really helpful to your build, I wouldn't hesitate too much to use those. In regards to +3 or +3%, I would typically say the flat +3, just because of the fact that I'm assuming you're talking about like for health or mana or energy shield. That's all based off of an equation. It's a relatively simple equation, like the basis of it. Whenever you see a percentage, it's giving you a percentage of your base. So that flat 3 is adding to your base, which you want to have a decent or high enough base number, so that way if you do pick up an item that gives a higher percentage, it's going to make a difference. 200% of 1, that's still only 200. Whereas, an extra 100% on 4, you're looking at 400. So, you want to have a decently high base. And the other reason why I would suggest a higher base is because it's a lot more difficult to find higher base stats in your passive tree as opposed to percentages. There's a ton of different nodes that'll give you a plus percentage to your shield or your health, to where, getting the flat number, there are some, but it's not as prevalent as the actual percentages. And we're going to keep going through this map just because I want to see if we can actually get a shaper item to drop here. Purple drops. I'm not sure what you're referring to. I'll have to see once we actually run into one of those again. So one thing you'll actually notice about a Shaper Influence map too is the ground's going to be torn apart, and it's going to have like that little galaxy background that their different items have. Just another way for you to tell that you're actually in a Shaper influenced map. Typically you'll run into at least one Shaper item in a Shaper map. Kind of disappointed we haven't found one yet, especially considering we already defeated the boss. The boss won't always be the one to drop that item, by the way, either. Any random enemy in this map can drop us a Shaper item. It doesn't have to be the boss. Just the fact that one drops what's technically called a Shaper, the other drops Elder items. The Elder is actually also more powerful than the Shaper. So once you actually get into that fight, you're going to have a much easier time defeating the Shaper as opposed to the Elder. Both offer good benefits, though. Are these the purple drops you're asking about? Because these are essentially just breach items. Which just means like that little breach that I opened, they'll only drop from those. So like if you're running just normal game content and not running any breaches at all, you're not going to see those items. The one item was a splinter. Where is it? Oh, right here. And if you collect 100 of these, you can actually open a portal to the Breachstone Lord that's in that area, and he can potentially drop you some really good gear. And then they'll also drop rings, which typically these aren't the greatest, but if you're in a breach, like it says at the top, all those stats are doubled. So they are useful for actually running in breaches. So if you do plan on like grinding some breach lords, it's not a bad idea to keep a couple of those on you, strictly for when you're running breaches, just because it's gonna double those stats and make that item actually useful. Only 4 monsters, so I don't think our likelihood of getting one of those items is that great here. It can drop in a memory, so maybe we'll get lucky in here. The only thing I don't like about running memories in maps is just the monster density. It just increases your likelihood of dying, and everything closes so quickly. So we had a unique drop back there, but once this closes up, it'll drop that for us outside of the map. So I think the other one will be on this side, just based off of the way it's closing. See, like that monster density is insane. And like, I don't want that 10% penalty for dying. But we did close them all up, so...
There's more to that memory. I just know it. Perhaps we'll find the rest.
And that's one I actually hadn't completed before, so that's awesome. But yeah, unfortunately we didn't get any Elder items. Cool bow. I have a unique stash, so I actually like to keep all my uniques. I don't really know how much Standard League I'm going to end up playing in the long run, but it still doesn't hurt to, stack up a few items. So this is a chromatic item right here. So this, when I go to sell it to the vendor, I'll get a chromatic orb in return. So those are always worth keeping. I'm just going to get rid of that ring because, well, actually it's a level 73 ring, so I'm not going to sell that to him. I'm going to hold on to that ring. And this is what I like to do for my chaos recipe. I'll just kind of hold items in here. Like, I'll keep some jewelry down here, just because you're not as likely to run into jewelry as much as you are, like, you know, your regular gear. And this is all stuff that's from level 65 to level 74. You collect a full set of items between those levels, and if they're unidentified, you get 2 Chaos Orbs for it. So, great way to grind currency. I did make a video on it that you guys can check out too. I describe it a bit more in detail there. Between level 75 and 100, it'll actually grant you Regal Orbs, which I believe that's actually a full set. So I'm going to trade in this currency, and then I'll show you exactly what I mean. Just move this stuff over. That I don't really care about, but it's whatever. And so you can kind of base this off of what you actually have equipped. So we obviously have a helmet, a chest piece, gloves, and boots. So that covers like your main armor. One-handed or 2 one-handed weapons, that covers our weapon slots. Belt covers our belt. Oh, actually, you know what? I don't have enough because I don't have a second ring that's level 75 or up. So that's actually why I didn't turn that in quite yet. So yeah, that makes sense. And that's not a bad idea to do either. Because chance orbs can be useful for a multitude of reasons. I mean, even if, you know, you're just looking to hopefully get a better item from crafting, it can be a cheap way to potentially get a unique. If you're using it for crafting, you're more likely going to run into a magic item. But, I mean, you can craft some great rares and even uniques at times with those too. So notice we actually just got an offer for an item that I have on the trade market. It's a 5 link, but if I remember correctly, it's just a base. They're offering us 2 chaos. I actually didn't even put an asking price on there. This isn't something I'm going to use, so I'm going to take it. I don't mind giving someone a 5 link that I'm not going to use that has no stats on it whatsoever for a couple of chaos. Some people might be a little bit more picky or ask for a bit more, but the way I look at it, it's not something that I can use. It's not going to help me. It's potentially going to help somebody else out. And there's honestly not enough people looking out for their fellow players in the game, so farm for good gear in Act 4. So the gear is typically going to be pretty randomized, but the higher level area that you're in, the better gear that's going to drop, just because the gear that drops is going to be based on the area that you're in. So I would honestly go to the highest level area that you can and just kill enemies in that area. That's going to yield your highest potential. Even if you do have a loot filter on, it's not a bad idea to occasionally press the left stick in to check out some of the white items that have dropped in the area, because they can potentially make for good crafting bases. And you can also talk to the different NPCs that are in town that sell items as well. They may sell you some decent item bases for you to craft off of too. So another neat little thing here about the... because I'm a hoarder. There's really no better reason for it than that. I keep these ones here just because they're magic versions of the actual, like the special different flasks. I suppose that one's, I actually have that one in the wrong spot. This tab I have saved up just because these are all flasks that have extra quality on them. Because if I vendor, let me see, so 14 and 11's 25, 30, 10 is 40. So if I sell flasks to any of the NPCs that have 40% quality, I'll get a glass blower's bauble, which can be used to improve the quality of flasks that I'm actually going to use. So I typically pick up flasks that have improved quality, so that way I can trade them in for that. I have all these sitting here just because I've been lazy and I haven't gone through and actually traded them in for currency quite yet. And the same goes for essentially every item in the game when it comes to quality. So if you trade in armors that have quality up to 40%, I can actually show you here in the currency tab. You get a blacksmith whetstone for doing that with weapons, armor scrap for doing it with armor, glass blowers bauble like I just showed you for the flasks, gem cutters prisms if you actually do that with gems. And I suppose you probably get that for quality on maps, but I would honestly prefer to just run my maps and pick up cartographer's chisels as I play through. Gem cutters prisms, in my opinion, are going to be the hardest to run into. I don't keep gear just because of quality that's on it, because you're going to run into so many blacksmiths, whetstones, and armor scrap later on in the game. It might not be a bad idea to do early, just so you can kind of get a base of those built up, because it's good to improve your item's quality when you're crafting. But later on in the game, these are going to drop so often that it's just not worth your time to pick up weapons and armor that actually have that. But I would do it for flasks, and I would definitely do it for gems, especially for gems, because gems only take up one spot on your inventory. With this character, I've just kind of randomly picked up some gems of so there's 8% quality on this one. Honestly, most of these gems I'll probably just end up throwing out because he's going to get merged with my other characters. But yeah, if you find quality on a gem, keep it. Absolutely keep it. Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of different mapping strategies you can use for, getting really good items early on, though. And when you're not quite doing a ton of mapping, it's just another good way to actually, be able to get yourself some of those. One cool thing here about this map stash tab is the fact that there'll be a little light underneath here, and if I hover over it, it'll actually tell me if my Atlas bonus is complete. So it actually gives me an opportunity to kind of look through, see what maps I have that maybe I haven't necessarily finished the bonuses for. Which it's not really looking like I currently have any maps that I haven't finished the bonus for. Except for this tier 7, Bone Crypt. So this will actually give me a good opportunity to show you exactly how to scour your items too. So this is a blue map, but in order for us to get our Atlas bonus, we need it to be a yellow map. Now one way we would be able to do that is Regal Orbs, but I don't have any Regal Orbs right now with this character. So a way around that is I will take an Orb of Scouring, which will turn this back to a white map, and then I can just elk it from here. So use an Orb of Alchemy, and that'll turn it into a rare map. Now one thing you'll want to pay attention to are the different modifiers that are on here. Since I'm using elemental damage, the one stat I don't want to see on here is that my enemies are going to reflect my elemental damage back to me, because we will die fast. But this doesn't have any of that, so I'm not too concerned with it. The two big things for this character are the reflected elemental damage, like I had mentioned, and we don't want to have a penalty to our mana regen, because that will kick our butts with this character. We'll be in a huge hole. And so once you're finished with a map and you want to put another map in, it's the same process as the first map that you put in, and it'll just replace all those portals. We didn't have a reason to go back into that map, so we're not going to. Now, here we're going to want to be a little bit cautious, just because we're in a tier 7 map. It's going to be a lot more difficult than the maps that we were just in. And the Shaper is actually here, so that means this is a Shaper influence map on the Atlas. Which is nice because we actually didn't even check for that. Now you're going to notice that item that just dropped there. It has a much darker yellow tint to it. I'll show you what that means here in a moment. It actually is important. See, my other build that I run actually is Volatile Dead build, so I haven't actually gotten that modifier yet with this character, so I just assumed that it was for any elemental damage types, so that's actually really good to know. Okay, so we cleared that area out, and I would recommend clearing out things a little slower. If you're not like this character, there's a couple of uniques I could really use to make him stronger, so he's a little weaker than I'd prefer for him to be right now. So on a tier 7 map, I'll be a bit more cautious because I don't want to get that 10% penalty because it's going to wipe out a lot of progress. But these darker tinted yellow items, if I click the left stick in, you're going to see it means that they're above level 75. So if we do the recipe that I was talking about for Chaos Orbs with these, instead of a Chaos Orb, we're actually going to get a Regal Orb. Now, I already have weapons for all those, so I'm actually not going to pick any of those up. This guy's a jerk, so he's going to die. Later on, I would also be weary of strong boxes. We'll see if it happens here. It happens like every time I hit a strong box, though, where it'll petrify you in place, and you'll pretty much get murdered. Didn't happen there, but definitely could have. So as you can see, our enemies are definitely hitting a lot harder in tier 7. But we're also going to pick up much better items. Hopefully we pick up a ring, because we're actually only a ring away from being able to do that Regal recipe. Regal orbs are more valuable than Chaos orbs, and they're also really useful for crafting because you can actually upgrade a blue item to a yellow, which can be pretty useful in helping you pick out more specific stats, because you can essentially create a blue item. If you don't like the 2 modifiers that are attached to it, you can then go ahead and regal it, or not regal it, scour it, turn it back to white until you get 2 modifiers that you really like, and then use a Regal Orb on it to turn it from blue to gold. Yeah, see, I make the mistake when I go into these sometimes of just not bringing currency with me, which is, it is a mistake on my part, and I'll tell you why. It's because of the fact that there's just not really a reason not to. At this point in the game, like, you're gonna get so many of those orbs, you know, just from normally looting enemies that aren't even that powerful, to where there's not really a reason to not bring them with you for strong boxes, because strong boxes can contain some really great items. It's just a bad habit that I've gotten myself into, and every time I run into a strong box, I think about it too. I'm like, I should have brought some orbs with me, instead of just leaving them all sit in my currency tab. Now, if you're confident that you're not going to, you know, die a bunch of times in a map, and I mean, you should be, because obviously you don't want to die a bunch of times in a map, you could always just go ahead and portal back, grab the orbs you need, and then go back to the strong box. It's definitely better than, you know, risking being frozen in place and just destroyed. So like, you'll see this item here, it's yellow, but it doesn't have that darker shade. So my guess is that's probably like an item level like 74 item. Got a couple of divination cards, which is nice. So I think this is actually the other reason why people have been slower to level in the Flashback League, is because these extra modifiers that are in here, they are beneficial in the fact that, you know, you're getting extra items like the different shards that like the Harbingers drop, because typically people spend currency to be able to run into Harbingers. Like, it's a very, very ideal modifier to get. But they hit hard, and they hit fast, and they can corner you. So it's a lot easier to die when Harbingers are involved. So you have to be a bit more careful, and if you're not, you know, you're going to die, and you're going to lose experience. Yeah, that's a habit I've had to get out of with this character. And I was even doing it in the beginning with my Necromancer character too, because of my Templar, my Inquisitor. Does a lot of crit damage, but he's also relatively tanky too. So, you know, I can take a couple of decent hits with him, and because of you know, having that consecrated ground and being able to just regen my shield and my health, you know, you kind of get used to being able to just stand in one spot and not worry about dying. But then you go and you start running something that's more of a movement build, and yeah, you kind of shoot yourself in the foot a few times. Like right here, if I'm not careful, we're gonna rip here. Yeah, so like you're super tanky with your Templar then. And we got a maze map, which that's one that should be not as common to drop for us because it's just a map that we've previously unlocked. It's tier 3, so obviously it's not attached to this tier 7 map. I wish he would summon something so we could finish off. They're probably all in here. So that's the other thing about Harbingers, is they're immune to damage, and you actually have to attack their minions in order to lower their health to get rid of them. Excuse me. But once they do end up dying, as you can see, they drop some pretty useful shards. And they're self-explanatory exactly what the shard is. You collect enough of those and it'll create the respective orb. Yeah, with my my Inquisitor, I use a decoy totem, so I literally get no damage from my totem whatsoever. But that thing's between that and my consecrated ground, you know, I can heal while my enemies are distracted. It typically works out pretty well for me. There's more efficient ways, I'm sure, to, you know, build my Templar, but I just have fun running it the way that I do. And that's something to keep in mind too. Just for anyone who's just starting to get into building their own character, or, you know, maybe you're just starting and you're starting to look at some build guides, I would encourage deviating away from the guides from time to time. You know, learn some things that you like and just make your build fun to what you want to do. And this right here sucks. I forget which. I think my health one on the left ignores freeze. No, it does not. So enemies like this drive me nuts. I hate being frozen, and I should have a flask for it. I thought I did, but maybe I don't. We're gonna rip here. Son of a bitch, I knew it. So that's 10% health, or 10% experience gone. I could have sworn... Oh, it's that flask. That gives me immunity to freeze and chill. I wish I'd remembered that. That'd have been really useful. So this would actually be a super useful piece of gear if it was a 6-link for us. Life, mana, endurance charge duration, gaining life when we lose endurance charges. Yeah, cold damage wouldn't be so bad if it didn't slow you down so much. And with this being more of a movement, skill build, revolving around needing to move around with my movement skills, it's just this build's kryptonite. You get frozen like that, there's not really a whole lot you can do about it. Level 76, so we can actually go ahead and finish off one of our Regal recipes. So we'll move this 6-link over here, and we're going to keep that for Jewelers, or well, we're not going to keep it, we're going to trade it in for Jewelers Orbs. Yeah, Chaos is difficult just because of the fact that, one, it's not as common to roll on your gear for Chaos resistance as it is for, lightning, fire, and cold. And two, because like a lot of the builds that I like to build are based around energy shields, and it just completely negates energy shield, which is ridiculously annoying. So we got 2 Regal Orbs, because those are all unidentified level 75 and up items. We had a full set. So now that I remember that I have something to negate that cold damage, we should have a lot more success against this enemy now. But yeah, the thing is, like, at this point, like, I'm level 79 with this character, so, like, dying sucks, but it's not like I'm losing, like, an hour worth of my experience. Once you get to higher levels and you rip, like, that 10% is a huge kick in the gut. He's gonna kill us anyways. Yes, that guy was a jerk. And not like that guy at all. So we'll grab a few of these just to help us create another recipe. Oh, they were nice enough to drop us a Chaos Orb at least. And that's the thing too, like, this is very much a game of risk versus rewards. So like, these higher tier maps, we're gonna have a much higher probability of dying, obviously. And these aren't even high tier maps, like, we're in the mid tier maps right now. It's just with me being a couple items short of my build. It's just a little detrimental to us. Because ideally we would want to have that direct cold to fire conversion for that Frostburno hood that I just can't find because literally no one has it in the trade market right now. And the other thing I need is also something that's not in the trade market, which is dual bell timbers, which is a one-handed sword, which these projectiles were firing per bell timber that you have equipped, it'll actually create 2 more projectiles. So instead of firing 1 like we are now, we'd be firing 6. So basically it just sends our DPS through the roof. That would be awesome. That was close. Anything to negate frost in general, I would be 100% for. Because frost damage is just, it's awful. I just hate feeling like that slow. Like, it's difficult enough going through like that beginning portion of the game before you have a movement skill, and like before you have any boots that have movement speed attached to them, let alone when you're just crawling around because you're frozen. See, the thing with having those 6 projectiles, if I actually had that item, I need to be careful here. You know, at that point, I could literally just hold my Winter Orb, and I didn't recast my auras. That's why I'm not doing much damage. Yeah, I could essentially just hold my Winter Orb and dash through the whole level, and just let my Winter Orb do 90% of the work. So, I mean, the positive thing is we should gain a majority of our experience that we lost there back, as long as we don't rip again. See, and there's some armor scrap, like I mentioned earlier. You're going to run into a ton of that once you hit endgame, which is why I don't pick up items strictly for quality. Well, we should all be getting spoiled here soon with instant cast movement skills with the next update. So that's going to be awesome. Let's see. Don't think I have gloves for all of those crafting recipes. So at this point in the game, really all I pick up are currency items, the different quality items I told you about before, and then just items to either do like the Chaos or Regal recipes so I can start stacking up some currency. You can definitely tell that we're not in the low tier maps anymore, just based off of like the quality on the enemies that we've been fighting too. Just not nearly as many whites and blues as we're running into like golden unique item or enemies. I kind of get the impression that that's like sort of what we're getting. I'm hopeful that that's what we're getting. That's actually like the one reason why I like Diablo 3 on console more than I like it on PC, because I don't think like they have that role on PC yet. At least the last time I played on PC they didn't. Where on console you just flick the right stick and, you know, you get a nice roll. I think they did confirm that we're getting a movement skill that'll be assigned to the right stick for each class, so I'm hoping it'll be really similar to that. I mean, that's a lifesaver. Got these stupid harbingers to deal with. I need to use my Winter Orb a bit more. Now your Winter Orb will actually takes about 6 or 7 seconds before it completely charges down. So as long as you remember to like hit it again and hold it for a couple seconds after about every 5 seconds, normally you'll be fine. I hate attacks like that. And at this point, I'm also keeping a mana flask on me, just for those moments where I do completely run out. No, don't kill me again. That's so annoying. We're so far away from him and he's still doing those attacks to us. And our health flasks are out of charges. We need to resummon our stone golem. So we'll kind of let our health refill here. Kind of bit off a little more than we could chew in this map. Alright, let's see if we can just finish him off fast. Whew, that was close. See, and that's kind of what sucks about... I probably would have ran something a little differently if I had known how heavily dependent I was going to be on those couple of uniques. Because most of the builds that I do, I try to not rely on specific items in order to make the build, you know, hit its maximum efficiency. But for this build in particular, there's just a couple that are almost a necessity. And if we had that extra DPS, I mean, it's a ridiculous amount of DPS that we're leaving on the table without having those items. It makes up for, you know, kind of the lack of tankiness that the build has. It essentially turns us into a glass cannon. Except the cannon's the size of a mortar. Like, you're just doing ridiculous amounts of damage. So without having that, we're just not running this build nearly as efficiently as we could be. Just because we would be killing stuff so quick that a lot of this damage that we're taking, it wouldn't matter. Like, we wouldn't even be taking it. So we wouldn't be giving the enemies an opportunity to even hit us. Because basically we could just be holding our Winter Orb, spamming our movement skill throughout the entire level, and be done with this map in like 5 minutes. That's not even an exaggeration. But since we've lost so much DPS by not having those specific items, it just kind of changes everything. But, I mean, that's not even something I can necessarily blame on the trade market, just because items, you know, it's not even that they're overpriced in this instance, they just don't exist on there. I think the only reason why I actually ran this build was just because I thought Winter Orb was really interesting, and odds are they're gonna nerf it into oblivion next league. So I wanted to give it a try while I still could, and I just didn't realize that the items I was gonna need were going to be as rare as what they were. But, I mean, you live and you learn. That's it. The thing with builds in this game, you're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna have builds that don't come out the way that you want them to, and you just have to learn from it. You know, the biggest mistake you can make is by not making any mistakes. You know, by playing it safe all the time, never like stepping outside of your comfort zone and trying something new. Because the biggest thing you're going to learn from this game is your mistakes, if you let yourself do it. You know, that's why I encourage to, you know, even if you find a build guide that's super easy to follow and the build's really good, deviate from it. Try a couple of different things. You know, you're likely not going to improve on build guide from a really experienced PC player, but you can do something different that's almost as efficient. Or maybe works in a completely different way. I don't even remember what my first Duelist was on PC, but it was terrible. It was like the first, this could be very good. Usually that blue star means we just found something that's actually worth a pretty penny. I think it was the first build I tried building from scratch, and like, it was awful. It was really bad. So is it the boss at the tier 1 map that's getting you, or just like the random creeps throughout the level? I think my first Duelist, I ran this really weird type of like totem hybrid build, and it just didn't, like, I spread my passive skill points out way too far. I tried to do too much. I really just needed to scale it back and try to do one thing, as opposed to thinking like, oh, I can do, you know, my melee damage, and I can have totems, and I could cast this, and it was just, I think it was when I learned the most about synergizing everything that I was using, and not trying to do too many different individual things with one character. So if it's just the boss, are you getting like one-shotted by the boss itself, or? So if you're getting one-shotted, it's likely either your resistances or your health. Yeah, and it was way too spread out, but I mean, it was a great way for me to learn about the fact that, you know, you essentially want those one or two skills that are, you know, creating your damage. You want a couple of skill gems to, you know, make some defensive layering for you. You want your movement skill. I mean, there's a lot of build diversity in the game, but the basics usually function the same way. You're usually trying for, you know, similar things.
He told me to meet him out here at midnight. Well, it's midnight and he isn't here, and I can hear wolves nearby. He better hurry up.
Like, if you have 3 different damage, you know, attacks for, you know, your main damage, like, you're doing too much, and it's not gonna work.
That's it. I'm out of here. Now, which way did I come from? Is it this way? No. It must have been this way. This doesn't look familiar either. None of this looks familiar, and I think I hear the wolves coming closer.
God, I'm getting cornered. This sucks. Can't move around this rock. Ah, that sucked. That is the one downside to using shield charge, is one little item in the environment. You get stuck on it, you're dead. And that's it. The good old 300 strategy. But yeah, Darkness, look into your resistances first. Odds are the boss is probably doing an elemental type of damage that you may have a low resist on. You want to be as close to 75% as you can be. And if that's not the issue, your health pool is likely just too small. My goal at endgame is usually around 5,000 health. Like this character that I'm running, about 3,500 health, 1,300 energy shield, so it's about 4,700 altogether. Yeah, if your fire resistance is at 6%, that's likely what's getting you, because fire type damage is really common in the game. So you're probably running into a gearing issue. And that's typically what will happen with people. Usually, I mean, if you've made it to endgame and you've started mapping, your skill tree is likely not the problem. It got you far enough to the point where you were able to, beat the base game and actually get to mapping. So at that point, it's usually the fact that, after you beat Kitava for the second time, you're suffering that 30% penalty to your elemental resists again. So what may have been somewhat sustainable before becomes completely unsustainable defensively. So you kind of have to get creative and start gearing again after you face Kitava a second time. Yeah, I'd say if I learned one thing from this character, it's to definitely not, assume that there's going to be something on the trade market for you that you're going to need. On PC, there typically will be, but PS4, we just don't have the amount of players that they have on PC, so there will be items that just don't show up on the trade market. I think I've seen one Frost Furno the entire time the Flashback League's been going. Yeah, so there's a lot of nasty stuff in that room. There we go. I really do apologize for all the coughing tonight, too. I've been trying to kick this nasty cold for a while now. So from here, we'll actually have to drop some items, or we've actually got a few portals left, so we'll probably just go into town, store some stuff, and come back for some of our loot. Wow, there's still people who are doing things first in the game. That's pretty cool. So this right here, this will actually represent a shaper item. Got some chisels. Drop some really good items in here. So we'll portal back real quick, store some of our items, and then come back for the rest of our loot. Portal. Oh, something to increase your rarity item drops. I'm probably the wrong person to ask that to be honest with you, just because I've always been adamant about not really keeping item rarity drop items, because I've always thought that it's more important to actually, you know, keep items that do more DPS, because the faster you kill, the more loot that's going to drop in general. I understand what you're saying, though, and that is actually a bit different, because you're talking about, like, basically just switching your gear out in order to get higher rarity items. I honestly don't know. I would take it through a few test runs, to be honest with you. Like, maybe find an area and run like... Sorry. Just give me 1 second. What I would do is probably run like 2 or 3 corrupted chambers where you try it with the item rarity, and then run a few without, and see if you actually notice any noticeable difference. Kind of experiment, see if there is a noticeable difference for you, and if there's not, I wouldn't waste the time. Just because it seems like a lot of effort, so if you're not, you know, cashing on that effort, if you're not getting good enough stuff from, you know, putting that amount of effort into trying to get better drops, then it's not worth it in the long run. You could be spending that extra time, you know, grinding even more. So we actually don't need those. We could use gloves over here. We have helmets. Now, this gives us energy shield, and we already have 2 helmets stashed away, so at this point I would just identify this. That is a horrible life roll, so we're not going to use that item. We'll just vendor that. This is going to be for vendoring. We'll identify these, even though we're not going to use them, just so we can hopefully get some alchemy shards. Yeah, thanks for dropping in, man. I'm honestly, after we pick up this gear over here, just because this cold's kind of driving me nuts, and I've been streaming for a little while now. We'll probably call it here pretty soon, too. This is actually that amulet that I picked up. Ooh. Yeah, that is not bad at all. We're actually going to just set that aside for now. That's something that may be worth putting on the trade market there. So we'll get rid of these with Reinhardt. 2 alchemy shards out of all that. Which is fine. Better than nothing. And the cool thing about putting portals in the actual maps themselves is it's going to take you back to that exact location. So one thing you may want to consider doing, because it doesn't actually count against your outside portals until after you leave. So if I use a portal scroll within the actual map itself, but I don't leave the map, so I don't go through that portal, it's not going to count as one of my portals. It won't until I actually enter it. So say you're about to approach the boss fight or an enemy that you just don't like the odds of you defeating, you can place that scroll before you get there and essentially use it as a fast travel in case you die. So that way you don't have to run through the entire map again through a bunch of emptiness just to get back to that boss. We'll actually check that out to see if we can upgrade our current gear. And that's the other thing too, since I'm running like an energy shield build, if I find a higher level like headpiece that has energy shield in it, since, you know, right now my headpiece isn't one of the uniques that I'm using, I'll pick it up just to see if I can potentially get some better rolls and upgrade. And that'll get us a chromatic. So that'll be all our loot from here. And this is one of the shaper items I was telling you about. Typically you'll find at least one of these in shaper maps. Sometimes you'll find multiples even. We just got super unlucky in that first shaper map that we ran. And it was, you know, a lower tier also, which may have had some effect on that. But yeah, we've been streaming for about 2 hours now. My cold, as you can probably tell, is definitely getting over me. Do appreciate you guys sticking it out with me though through the night and being a part of the stream. I do have another stream that's going to be on Friday, same time, 8 o'clock Central. And starting next week, I'm actually going to be moving my streams over to Twitch. I do have my Twitch account listed in the description of all my videos. It should be in the description on the channel as well. So I would be more than happy if you guys would come on and also, you know, continue to follow me on Twitch and check out the streams. I will be uploading those streams to YouTube as videos, so that way if you can't catch them, you can still see everything after it happens. Let's see, what can I reveal? Oh, so you're talking about like taking your current character and then moving them back to level 1 like you can in D3? I don't believe so. I think you actually have to completely start a new character. They may have changed that, but I'm pretty sure back when I played on PC, you had to completely start a character from scratch. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and call it a night from there. Thank you guys again so much for being a part of the channel and coming and watching me stream. Remember to check me out on Twitch. Like I said, the link is there in all of my videos and in my channel description itself. I will be back again on Friday through YouTube, so definitely come back, check it out then. And if you guys have some flashback characters who are in the mapping stages, we can definitely run some maps together. So hope you all have a great night. Thanks again for joining in, and until next time, may the RNG be with you, always.